to a girl talk like this on the Requiem Metal Podcast. This is Mark.
And I'm Jason. And don't call it a comeback, Mark, but apparently we're back.
Well, it was the last time we were on the air, or on the internets, it was 2013, July 1st, 2013, with our Entombed EP show. And things just kind of life got in the way, whatever happened. It's been a long time. It's hard. It's weird even coming back to this. So this one might be a little.
Yeah, this is our kind of get the rust out of our system kind of episode. So we gave ourselves a lot of wiggle room to be able to talk about.
And it took us a year, I think, just to. Well, we talked about, hey, let's do this again, and then to schedule everything, and then just to get it to a time where it can actually come together.
I know. So, I mean, I guess, what we started with there, just, I guess, to mention it, even though it was only 30 seconds or so, I told Mark that if we're going to do a comeback episode, we got to do something with LL Cool J, Don't Call It a Comeback. And so I figured, rather than play the actual Mama Said Knock You Out, they do a little sample from a band that I'm kind of into called Girl Talk, which is basically a dude that just mixes all this old shit together in his basement, hip hop, old, stuff like that. But it's from an album called Feed the Animals. You can find it for free online. But
so we will not be talking about metal at all this episode. That's why we haven't.
We're going to talk all about Girl Talk, which I could talk about that song because it actually goes into Metallica 1. So there is some kind of metallic aspects to that. But yeah, I mean, in terms of like life stuff, Mark. As you know from the last batch that we did, Mark moved down to kind of Hamtramck again after living
surrounded
here
by Detroit. Yeah,
after living here, which made it sort of convenient for us to do all those podcasts all those years. Living kind of in the same space. I mean, and then got yourself into a pretty serious relationship to the point where give us a little update on Mark's life.
Engaged and stuff now, so we'll be married next year and. Figuring all that out.
Got a house. Yeah, so
which takes up more time than anybody could possibly imagine, which you understand.
Sure.
And also a kind of crappy house, so it has lots of stuff that needs to be fixed constantly. Our backyard.
Hamtramck, man.
Yeah. It's
from a friend of ours too that you bought it from, correct?
Oh no, we're just renting.
Oh, just renting. Gotcha.
But we basically have free reign to do whatever we want. So it's like hang out in the backyard and fix up the backyard. That became a lot of that stuff, and then just freelance everything. The older you get, time does go by quicker, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think, he and I both kind of got into our life grooves a little bit. Him having, kind of having the hustle bustle to do, like, survive freelance-wise, living in, like, Detroit and stuff like that. It just didn't present itself to give us some of that free time like we used to have, and especially when we used to live together where we could just be like, hey, like I know that like this Sunday afternoon is open, let's just record 2 episodes or something like that.
But 40 miles apart or whatever makes a little difference.
Yeah, you've got the drive, and then, it was a spatial issue, especially once you and Muriel, your fiancée, they start living together. Like it's, there wasn't like a ton of recording room and
there's no place to close off to be quiet.
Yeah, to like, because really, I mean, Mark's Bennett. We're up in Romeo podcasting, which is where Mark and I lived together for years. We have we've basically been doing stuff pre-gaming for like the last 3 hours, 2 or 3 hours, like listening to music, talking about stuff.
About wrestling.
Yeah, exactly. We talked about all the dead WWE wrestlers that have passed away since we did our last podcast. So, here's one to Roddy and Dusty and those guys. But
exactly.
So again, it's tough if you don't have that sort of space to be able to have the whole afternoon blocked out where you're free of distractions and stuff like that. It just hasn't really sort of come together. And I was telling Mark, like, it's been tough for me because the longer that it went without us podcasting, the more I sort of faded away from kind of being on top of things when it came to like the world of metal and stuff like that. Sure. I just haven't, I read Decibel. I talk to Mark on occasion about some of this, and we have our friend Chris, who writes for Decibel, that's been on some of the podcasts, and he keeps us abreast of certain things too. But I think as you get older, you get a lot more niche-y. You're not as like into like taking chances and experimenting on stuff you don't really know about. Like you're kind of like in your groove. So it's like, I'm still going to buy like the new Paradise Lost when it comes out and stuff like that, but I'm not really spreading my wings a whole lot and trying to discover kind of the next it band as much as maybe I was even like 3 or 4 years ago when we were really in the heart of doing our podcasting.
No, I think, because at least for me, the older I've gotten, the more I'm like, okay, this is the stuff I really like. I'm going to follow Paradise Lost and Carcass and, newer bands like Horrendous, stuff that really connects with me. But I'm not going to be as, I think, I don't need to experiment as much to find out what I like, because I know what I like.
Yep.
I know what's good to me. And I don't have that need to find the next thing.
Sure.
And just being involved with Metal Hammer, well, I guess less with Metal Hammer, but more with Decibel, that keeps me up on the loop. Okay, here's what you're going to draw this month. I never heard of them. Oh, it's good. Okay, cool. But I didn't have to do any legwork myself.
Yeah.
At all. So it's I'd rather go back and listen to old stuff, rewatch old TV shows, rewatch old movies. I'm in that mindset and just really cutting the fat off of new stuff.
Sure.
That's got to have something, either somebody I really respect told me to go check it out, that knows what I like. I don't need to check out Whitechapel or whatever. That's not even a new band, but that's
that style. I know what you're talking about.
But there was a guy that stopped me at a gas station yesterday. That there was Michael Knight. I don't know if anybody knows who that is.
Never heard of it.
There was this big plastered van with this guy's pictures.
No,
Knight? Unfortunately, it was just some guy with a cowboy hat plastered all over a van. We're coming down from northern Michigan, and I was going in to get a water, and this guy stops me and was like, "Hey man, you what kind of stuff you listen to?" And I just said metal.
Yeah.
I had a sleeveless Merciful Fate shirt on that said "Satan is better than God" on it. And just wanted to be left alone. He's like, "So what do you listen to? You like Pantera?" I'm like,
Like some Five Finger Death Punch.
All right. I'm like, "What do you listen to?" I'm like, I just said, just to just get out of my face. I listen to just death metal,
Yeah.
Oh, like Whitechapel, no, Entombed and Dismember and Autopsy, stuff from the '90s. And he's like, "Okay, well here's this guy. If you're from around here." I'm like, "I'm from Detroit." "Oh, so you like Kid Rock?" I'm like, "Not at all." He's like, "Wow, that's the first time I've ever heard that." So
first time, really? Yeah, interesting.
That nobody's liked him. He just wanted to he was trying to be a PR guy and he was doing his thing. He was good at it. But I was just trying to get him away from me as quickly as possible. It's funny how much...
Was he literally just hanging out in a gas station waiting for people?
Parking lot, yeah, just talking to him, trying to give him promo CDs.
That's a good gig.
I was trying to just say, I just like death metal, leave me alone. But he knew to some degree what that meant.
Yeah.
Which is weird.
That's good.
It's that it's penetrating into... where the hell was that? Mayo, Michigan?
Yeah. Well, I think it's, you talk about where metal is at now, 2 years removed and stuff. I mean, we were just talking about a band like Ghost cracking the top 20 on Billboard charts and stuff, and Ghost has their own very niche-y kind of thing. And
sure,
you and I were really excited, especially when that first record came out. I think it was our album of the year or co-album of the year on our best of show that year.
And then saw them live for the first time. Which,
yeah, Metal Fest. Yeah. I've seen them. I think I've seen them twice now. Maybe, I don't know. Did I go the second time? I can't remember. I know I'm scheduled to go see them again. I can't remember if it was my second or third time, but yeah. So I mean, metal is healthy. It's alive. It's
penetrated the pop culture more than I ever thought it would.
Sure. Yeah.
Even extreme shit has gotten to that point.
Well, and I think I've talked about it before. On old episodes, just how my students that I teach have a certain tolerance for. They call it screamo vocals, but again, it's it doesn't scare them the way it did 20 years ago, or
where people are just turn this off. This is noise.
Yeah, oh, what is this? They don't necessarily there's gonna be people that don't get it, but I think through the internet and through whatever it is, just the iTunesation of us.
Even the gym I go to is just one of these Planet Fitness, those 24-hour places.
Yeah.
I always bring my own headphones because I can't stand listening to what they have. But they're playing Five Finger Death Punch, Lacuna Coil, which I can't believe how terrible they sound. I've been listening to them in 10 years.
Yeah, I haven't listened to them in a long time.
Wow, it's just insultingly bad.
Yeah.
A lot of those kind of I guess angular kind of heavy. It's not even. It's just girl power stuff at this point. But that stuff, it's being played in the gym.
Hey, pump up music, man. Lifting weights.
I guess it's nuts to me.
First time I ever lifted weights was Megadeth Rest in Peace in 6th grade with Brent Olson in his basement. They were rocking that out.
Okay,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
But it wasn't in a gym. It wasn't being
no, it wasn't in a gym. But it was
yeah.
I always thought of Pantera as weightlifting music.
That good pace. Obituary is very good treadmill music.
Yeah. Well, you look at guys like Phil, and they're kind of jacked up back in the day. Shirts and stuff like that. But no, I guess for us, we're talking about this idea of the comeback, and hopefully, we could do this whole podcast on that. TV show with Phoebe from Friends, The Comeback, which is on HBO.
Never seen
it's actually pretty good. Yeah. So, but no, I mean, we've gotten a lot of emails. We've gotten a lot of messages.
A ton.
We've heard you guys, and hopefully people are still with us when we put this episode out. I mean, it might take us a little while to kind of gain some more traction and get ourselves together a little bit, but it wasn't because we didn't want to get together. It was just that, we had different things kind of going on, and, it was sort of a matter of like, and I don't know if it was like, just getting away and getting kind of like a fresh slate, like, there was like a spatial thing, like we just reached maximum capacity, or if it was like for you, just like, just the time didn't match up. And
it came down to the hustling where you, everything had to make me money.
Yeah.
This wasn't making me money, unfortunately, because out of anything I've ever done in my artistic career at all, this has probably been overwhelmingly the most popular and the thing I've gotten the most good feedback about years after we've stopped from people I've never met before, yet it doesn't make you a cent.
Yeah, exactly.
But I've always enjoyed doing it, but I was at that point where I had to struggle to try to get I just got to make money.
Sure.
Without having to go and get a day job, which
and I've always when people have asked me about it, I mean, to be perfectly honest, like I've always said stuff like, well, in a way, like this podcast was something that was like a hobby for me, but for me, it was always meant as kind of an opening avenue for you to get some of like the attention that you needed to get into the mainstream of doing freelance sort of work, because it didn't matter whether or not I did this podcast. It had no bearing on my teaching career or anything like that.
Yeah.
But like from seeing where you came out of doing, a lot of maintenance work when we first started this, to then saying, well, I'm going to cut myself free and try and survive and live on my own artistic merits. I knew that in a sense, like this was a way, it was a calling card for you. It was like a giant business card of saying like, not necessarily showing your artistic like work, but showing that you had like some integrity and credibility when it came to being part of like the extreme metal or the music
some history
sort of world.
Yeah.
And so I guess like I always kind of took I sort of waited for you to need to do a show like this. I wasn't going to be like super pushy about it, because again, it was really fun. I love doing this show and the feedback I've gotten, and it's kind of neat to like throw this out to my students, and like they're kind of like, wait, what? You're on iTunes and you got like 170 episodes, and it totally weirds them out in a fun way.
It's a good excuse to get, because I'm the type of person who, I have a handful of friends that I keep fairly close, but it's always good to have artistic projects that keep us together, because I'm always thinking I've got to be doing something. I can't just sit around. And you're, the same way.
Sure.
Exactly. But it's a really good excuse for us to get together. And now it's more, I guess it's more of a hobbyish thing for me now, but it's just an excuse for us to hang out and talk about metal, which is one of my favorite.
And I was going to say,
talk about anything really.
The thing that I think I missed the most about doing the podcast was just the fact that it meant if we weren't doing the podcast, we didn't have an excuse to like hang out as much. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And and you were busy, you had a relationship going on. I had coaching and all the crazy sort of stuff that I have sort of going on here, and added responsibilities and stuff. So I mean, life happens, but like it goes
by so quick. Yeah.
All of a sudden, you're not doing your best of 2013 show, and you're like, oh, that's fine. We'll get something together in the winter time and spring, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, we'll get together summer of 2014, and just shit happens. All of a sudden, you're not doing a best of 2014 show, and then all of a sudden, here we are. 2
years go by.
And I mean, he and I have been talking about stuff probably since a little bit before Christmas. I think, it was kind of nice. I think that might have been the first time I think Muriel, your fiance, came up here, was Christmas, for the Christmas party I have, the Merry Metal Shipmas party, which is metal themed as well. And it was kind of fun, like to get these guys up here again. And you and I were kind of chatting about like, let's actually like do this and stuff. But it was just a matter of making it happen, and having something that we want to say and do and get things organized and getting that ball rolling.
Yeah, because I think you want to really, if it becomes like a doldrum trying to, like, what are we going to talk about?
Yeah.
Because at the Entombed EP show, it was difficult to try to like sit down and like, okay, we need to research something, we didn't have time, so like let's just do something we know well. And now it doesn't seem like a pain in the ass to do the notes and stuff. It seems like that's fun. It's an excuse for me to dick around on
stuff.
Write down a bunch of notes and get all this, like watch some documentaries, and because I've been watching tons of music documentaries no matter what genre, like the BBC Genesis documentary. It's like 3 hours long. It's fantastic. Cool. So I was like, I really miss getting into talking about this stuff again.
And I, teaching the rock and roll history class that I've made reference to before, for those of you that are old fans, I guess, I've definitely kept abreast of music documentaries and such, but it hasn't been as much of the metal stuff, because it's so rare that you get the metal stuff coming out, that's actually worth a shit. You might get like a bonus DVD that comes with a CD for an actual band, but it's usually like a making of the record, or it's nothing it's nothing like, say, the Cannibal Corpse documentary or the At the Gates documentary, where there's actually behind it,
The Cannibal Corpse one is one of the best.
That's incredible.
Ever. I mean, it's nothing you want to watch like every weekend necessarily, but it's so exhaustive. It's great. In a great way, and then it's not like they're full of themselves exhaustive. It's just like, we want to tell you every bit of what happened through the history. Or
the Iron Maiden one that Sam Dunn did, where there's actually there's like a thesis to it. You know what I mean? Like, there's a purpose. It's not just the behind the scenes. It's actual here's our there's some guidance to it, and I think a lot of like documentaries lack that sometimes.
Well, and the sheer glut of documentaries, that it's hard. Like, even with the stuff that Sam Dunn's done, but from like Metal Headbangers Journey to Global Metal, and then I think the Rush documentary is probably his best as far as like just talking head documentary. He did something interesting with the Super Duper Alice Cooper.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Documentary. It's pretty good, but there's no. I love talking head documentaries. Yeah. I like to see old footage, and then see old decrepit people that still try to look as much as they used to.
That's half my rock and roll history class in a nutshell.
Exactly. I mean, like some of those BBC documentaries, those punk documentaries and stuff are great.
Yeah. 7 Ages of Rock are great.
But I think he kind of hit a point where he wanted to artistically do something different. And that's where the Alice Cooper piece came out. But then the Metal Evolution series, which I don't know if that was out when
I think it was. I think we were, or it was about to come out. So, yeah, I think it was. I think it came out.
The Extreme Metal one didn't come out, I don't know.
No, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'd like to see an entire series on that. But that's my dream, is to see, and that's what I've always thought of the show as, too, is like some kind of, try to do some kind of actual critical thinking about the extreme stuff that we really care about, and that it means something in the overall scheme of everything.
Well, and one of the things I've done why we haven't been doing this podcast is I have a few obsessions, as Mark does, and one of my obsessions is Survivor, and I listen to Survivor podcasts constantly. Like, I have a Survivor club that I run at the school where kids are watching, and again, there's probably people listening that are like, what, Survivor's still on TV? Holy shit. Yeah, season 31 coming out soon. But I actually tried out for a Survivor podcast called The Survivor Historians, and a guy that I respect quite a bit. He's actually written a lot of books on Survivor and done some other things. His name is Mario Lanzo. And what he always said that he wanted Survivor Historians to be was something that you could listen to 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and it wasn't dated because it was a timeless kind of podcast. It wasn't something that, like, you had to listen to the week after an episode aired or something. It was something that was almost like historical in a way, like a documentary, where anytime you accessed it, you could kind of get the same feeling you got from it that you could 5 years before or 5 years later. And I think that's how I've always thought of our podcasts in a sense. Yes, we've done things where we've covered, I guess, bands of the moment, or something that we're really digging that just recently came out.
Sure.
But more often than not, I think we're doing stuff that is a little bit more on the timeless side, where at any given point you listen to it, you're going to be able to like appreciate it for what it is.
Yeah. I mean, even looking back at before we started doing it, I looked just to see like when the last time we did a show was, when the last time we uploaded a show was, and looking back, there's not a whole lot of splash, like there's nothing I can't stand up for, basically. Like, there's no one band where like, oh, they're just like, why did we cover that?
Yeah.
And even people will shit on Ghost for being popular,
but at that time we loved it.
I still enjoy them immensely. It's like, Satanic Abba. It's not,
if you're gonna take it seriously and like put it like neck and neck with like I don't know, like, I guess super artistic bands, like,
or even to be like the whole idea of that metal is still underground. Like, nothing is underground anymore with the internet. But people that say that it's not real, it's not true, who cares? Who gives a shit? That's been my biggest thing. Or another reason why I want to do the show again is just to be a mouthpiece to tell people, I'm so sick of hearing the true thing. And these are just weekend warrior people that are just, you might be in a band or something, but who are you to say what is good, what is true, what is, like, is Kiss, like, there's people that throw Kiss in black metal, I've heard before.
Yep.
Like, are you kidding me? King Diamond's not black metal, it's just heavy metal. Like, there's all these bands that can be pulled out of the ether that never... King Diamond was huge in the 80s. But seeing as Ghost has success and kids like it and girls like it, there's something ultimately not cool about it, I
mean, let's imagine if, like...
but they're young, too.
Some of the early Dark Throne and Burzum came out in the internet age. I mean, that shit would be, like, Death Haven. And, like, I mean, it would have, like, this, like, there would be some weird buzz about it. Like, oh, my God, have you heard, these
when black
metal records, and people would be shitting on them, like, oh, fuck, we can't touch Dark Throne, the hipsters.
Exactly. When Spin came out, I think it was Spin Magazine that did that Emperor piece.
Yeah, I remember that.
If that would have been internet times, it would have been a totally different story, and that stuff would have got like into at least a bigger people at least wanted to, like, figure out, like, what's all the controversy about or whatever.
And can you imagine being dissuaded from listening to Emperor or Arcturus in, like, 1994 just because you read about it in Spin Magazine, or you read it on the internet, and it, like, like, how dumb is that? Like, if you like it, you like it, I guess.
It's a different, I'm starting to feel the old manness a little bit. Like, okay, I guess my dad was right in a couple things. Like, how you see how it's a completely different way to interact with the world. I remember having to fight and dig and claw for every bit of information about a band. And now it's just anybody can have it anywhere on their phone at any time.
Yep.
That is a complete weird game changer that I don't know how that's going to affect things going forward.
Well, I definitely see it with my students because they've grown up with it in their lives on every capacity. Like, it's been part of their life. I mean, there are freshmen I have right now, ready for this? They were born 2001. There are kids in my high school that were born 2001. And that's something, like, you got to wrap your heads around. Like, that all they've known is post 9/11 society and internet and all this.
Because I really wasn't using the internet much until 2000. I had an email account in '97.
Yeah.
But it was like a novelty thing to send, like, a friend of mine or a PR person an email. But I wasn't using it for any great effect until, like, 2003 or 2004.
I think you were using it a little bit before that when we were doing, like, Requiem or, like, Eclipse and stuff like that. But I mean, it wasn't like every day.
Yeah, it wasn't like streaming. Like, I could stream anything I wanted. Like, you wouldn't get on, like, oh shit, Carcass did a reunion tour in Chicago. Like, I wonder what that looked like. Sure. Now that's up the next, like, 20 minutes later.
You can listen to sound clips and the whole 9 yards.
Yeah. So I don't know if it's better or not. It's just, maybe I'm butthurt because I don't have all the information at my fingertips. But that's what also brought like me and Chris together in high school. Like, there's only two or three of us that like this really obnoxious shit.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that would still happen quite as much.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just a different way you find people in chat rooms and Facebook.
I was going to say, I think what it is now, and this is where it's like, this is where you get kind of into some weird stuff, is you're not finding each other on a necessarily a physical level, but you're finding yourself, like, in a Facebook or a chat room sort of level where you find the community, rather than you find the community that you're, like, accessible to you, like, in a physical sense, you're finding it, like, in a more online sense, which
could be global.
Yeah,
which is fine.
That's cool.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's just different because it's not as tactile. I guess it's not like you're not meeting at a record store and, like, getting together and looking through CDs together through a record store.
Going to shows together,
sharing or doing something like that. So yeah, it is different. For sure.
But also, like this, like just meeting people, like, you've got this zine. I've never read an interview with, I don't even know who the fuck, Candlemass or somebody,
Yeah.
And then, like, just looking through people's, like, live. There's this guy, Jeff Savage, who I see at shows every once in a while. I've known him for a long time, just from being at death metal shows. He used to videotape a lot of the shows in Detroit, and I remember going to his when he was in college. We went over to his room to just, like, to trade some stuff or give them zines or whatever. He had this huge, at the time it seemed like a 50-foot long row of VHS tapes of every great death metal show in the United States ever.
Oh, wow. And nowadays that's YouTube.
God. It's YouTube.
That's all. You just go on YouTube. Yeah. Whatever you want.
Because that was like, holy shit, that's a body of work that you have right there. That's something you should like digitize and preserve. It's amazing.
And you think about the time that guy went to spend like tracking those down, getting them. You know, like
he shot them all.
Oh, well, that's even cooler.
And then traded stuff because like tape trading, you had to have
tape trading was the internet before the internet.
Yeah, but you also had to have a clout. Like people aren't going to trade with you if you just have the same stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't have anything good or exclusive, like you don't have this specific whatever Vader EP. Like I have nothing to trade with you, so I'm not going to trade.
Sure. Yeah.
So it made people up their game a lot, I think, too.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
So I guess when we decided to kind of put this together, the idea of the comeback episode, I kind of told Mark I thought it'd be interesting if we actually talked about the idea of the metal comeback or the extreme music sort of comeback. And, we've seen those, through the years. You have maybe in rock and roll history, you could make a pretty good argument that two of the greatest comebacks in history had something to do in a weird way tangentially with metal, which would be AC/DC Back in Black and Ozzy Osbourne Blizzard of Oz. In a sense, like, I've and I'm not saying AC/DC is a metal band, but there are metal people that like AC/DC.
They're hard rock
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, like you think about the idea of the comeback, and, it's pretty tough to come back from your lead singer dying and, stuff like that. And
a lead singer with that kind of distinctive voice and presence. And
or Ozzy Osbourne essentially washing out of one of the big rock bands that just, the whole thing seemed to be like just a disaster.
A million times bigger than Sabbath ever was.
Who knew, So you have comebacks have kind of come and gone. And, in recent times we've seen, comebacks from, Autopsy, Asphyx, these are bands that sort of kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, Death Magnetic, in a strange way, might have been a comeback, although they haven't really built much cachet off of that. They just sort of did it and moved on. They haven't really done much since, No,
it was. it was good to see them try.
Yeah, but it was fun to hear.
But it's like trying to tell a millionaire to tell you a really compelling story.
Yeah,
it's like, I can just pay you money to just there's no struggle there.
Absolutely. You and I were just talking about the brand new Iron Maiden that just came out. I mean, Iron Maiden's like a band that you could kind of say has had both failed comebacks and successful comebacks. I mean, you could see the X Factor, even though I know we've talked about how we actually, that's not a bad
It's got
record.
some good songs on it.
But in a way, I think critics have seen that as maybe a failure.
Absolutely.
They lost Bruce, they're dead in the 90s kind of thing. And then you get Brave New World.
And Bruce goes on to do Chemical Wedding and some really great things, but he doesn't even get any kind of a glimpse of what success Iron Maiden had.
Yeah.
So he got to do his own thing and then come back. They finally... It's like breaking up with your girlfriend. Man, we're really good together. Why don't we just see if we can get our differences apart?
Yeah. So you have, you have a band like Iron Maiden that again has had both failed successes and comebacks and stuff. Alice in Chains had a pretty successful comeback in a way with the
against
lead
all
singer.
odds.
Yeah. Celtic Frost. I mean, that was Monotheist is a pretty amazing kind of.
It was a comeback and a effigy, right?
Yeah.
In one thing, yeah.
Which is interesting, and so we kind of we're in the era of I guess big comebacks in the last few years, and so we decided to kind of look at 3 comebacks this episode. 2 that you could say are resounding successes, and one that I would say is not necessarily a failure, but there's been mixed feelings about it, and it's one that Mark maybe has not as much insight into, and he'll talk more about that a little bit later on, just because it's not a band that he's super compelled to, but Faith No More and Failure are 2 bands that in recent times have sort of done successful comebacks. I feel like I haven't really heard that new Faith No More at all.
I have, but I don't really care. I like the first 2 records a lot.
Yeah.
Or not the first 2, the second and the third record.
Angel Dust and Real Thing. Yeah. I like King for a Day a little bit in a weird way. It's kind of a strange, aggressive kind of record. But
I was I thought not to completely go off track, but these are the kind of things that I don't ever get to talk about with anybody else usually, except I explained this to Muriel and she's like, oh, I understand. She's like, why the hell do you like Faith No More at all?
Oh.
And I was like, well, I showed her, some of the Jim, oh my God, just fucking space.
Jim Martin
era stuff. And I was like, it was it was like this band fighting together. Like it was a guy just playing thrash riffs. Nothing. He didn't do any funk stuff on guitar.
No,
it was just thrash, like good thrash riffs.
Sure.
And then these other guys playing the stuff around it. And she's like, "Oh, okay, I get that.
Yeah,
that makes sense." But that's why I like those two records so much. That he was like obviously a great guitar tone and just playing thrash riffs against this weird funk stuff.
Yeah. And I've always, I think we could probably pull off a pretty interesting Faith No More episode sometime down the road. But
I saw them on the that last tour.
Did you?
And what was the original? You remember the original vocalist name?
Chuck something. We care a lot. I just remember.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
He came out to do a song.
Oh, really?
Which is
pretty badass.
Pretty neat. Yeah, my satisfied my 14-year-old
sure
thing to see him,
But I guess, those are two of the more storied comebacks in a way. Faith No More a little bit more in the mainstream, and Failure in a kind of indie rock, kind of even really our circles, because Decibel covered the Failure stuff, because Failure's had a pretty huge influence on a lot of bands, whether it be Perfect Circle, Deftones.
Because when they came out, nobody...
Yeah, they were pretty underground, and they were a band I didn't discover until I was in college, long after they were kind of done. You know? And hopefully for you, I'm guessing most of you listening to this probably didn't just discover two bands that we're going to talk about and know about their back catalog far before 2013, 2014. But two of the success stories in terms of comebacks are Carcass and At the Gates. And, I go back and I think about, speaking of kind of old Requiem podcast kind of things, when we interviewed Albert back in episode 14 or 15, which, by the way, Albert... I think wants to do something with us. He wrote me a little... We need to figure out
the technology again, because my rig is not what it used to be.
Yeah, we'll have to come up with something. Maybe I can write a grant for that stuff. Let's get on that. But I remember in that when we were talking about Choosing Death, the first edition that Albert put out several years ago, and he's just recently done a kind of remix of it.
It was 11. I think 11 years ago.
Was it? Oh my god.
It was pre-Decibel.
Yeah, it was. Oh, yeah, it was. But we just talked to him right when we started the podcast, and it was for and we were also going to see At the Gates reunion show
in New York.
But at the time when we saw that show, At the Gates, it's kind of seemed like it was going to be just a kind of one and done tour type
just like
thing.
The Carcass reunion.
Just like the Carcass reunion. And I remember talking to maybe Albert and you about this, that my dream, I had seen At the Gates. I was lucky enough to have seen them back in high school, back in 97. So that was a big deal. But to me, the band that I was just sort of dying to see again was Carcass. I never saw them. They just were that band that I just felt like I needed to see sometime. And it just seemed like such a faraway dream. And then here we go, Carcass gets their reunion shows again, stuff like that. And then it was kind of okay, cool, that happened. But I wasn't necessarily clamoring for new records from those guys. So when they announced that they were going to put out records, there's a little bit of trepidation, because
absolutely,
you have this legacy kind of thing going on. You know, will they will they tarnish their legacy?
Well, and Carcass less to a degree, because they put out Swan Song, which isn't, because
we did a Swan Song episode.
We do, and I enjoyed the episode. It's not, or the episode. I enjoy the album. It's not necessarily quintessential Carcass, but it's it's of the time. It's what they were feeling at the time. But those first, up until that point, they were untouchable.
Yeah,
everything they did was great.
Yep.
Even as crappy as Reek is recorded, that is like a time capsule of what the extreme music was at that point. So I wasn't. Yeah, when I heard Carcass was going to do, I was super stoked, but it wasn't as big of a deal as, because it's okay, you got a turd, or not a turd, but you have a 70% successful record.
Yep.
Do something beyond that. Slaughter of the Soul was something that it basically spawned metalcore.
Yeah.
And the resurgence of Exodus and Slayer, all this stuff kind of came back. Dissection, all that stuff surrounding that. What the hell are they going to do?
Yeah, how can they top something that most people see as kind of a masterpiece of metal?
Yeah, and going from that kind of stuff where it's, because they started out really super eclectic and then got more focused,
streamlined,
yep. And the I'm not going to ever pronounce their name, the Broiler brothers, the Bijoler brothers. Yes. Their whole kind of stamp on it after Alf left, because the way he would take cassette tapes and play them backwards to figure out riffs,
really crazy riffs.
I don't think that's ever gonna. You can't do that.
Yeah.
After a certain point,
we all knew it wasn't going to be a Red in the Sky type.
When
album.
you know how to play guitar really well, like you've been playing guitar for 25 years, you can't. It's really hard to go back and try to reinvent the riff.
Yeah.
So what they did was much more. I didn't know exactly how to frame it. Like it's a much more cerebral, thought out. It's not as it's a much more intellectual exercise than what. There's no way you could go back in time and do that kind of stuff. Carcass did it really successfully, but it's not like they went back and re-recorded Reek.
Yep.
That's the fine line. It's like getting the energy or the enthusiasm from that point in time, but you can never go back and just have the naivete of not really knowing how to play guitar or record things. And whoops, this is what happened.
I mean, and even to a sense, like Symphonies. Symphonies is an updated, like kind of more like masterful version of some of the Reek stuff.
It's so catchy, but it's so poorly produced.
But it's just like a hot mess of things kind of happening. So you knew that if Carcass was going to draw from any pool, and Surgical Steel is the album we're sort of talking about, that they were going to go to Necroticism and Heartwork and Swan Song. And in a sense, I would argue that Surgical Steel is elements of those three records kind of blended together.
Yeah.
And perfect. More power to them, because I think if they had been able to perhaps continue and they hadn't been sort of like, record labeled to death with Swan Song and some of that stuff.
Yeah.
If they had gotten some of the ideas of Swan Song and been able to sort of mix them together with Heartwork, they could have really maybe, like gotten a second life after Swan Song immediately. But things just happened in such a negative way that they just walked away from it, and that's fine. Preserve their legacy for whatever it is, and some people think Swan Song tarnished it. I don't. You don't.
Yeah.
But there's some people. It's not as great of a record as Necroticism or Heartwork. No one's going to fight to prove that point. But
I mean, those also, you got to think of these kids. They were young. They were in their early 20s. Think of your early 20s. How many things, like you start with one, like how much you change from year to year. Look at kids in high school. You start out, you're this dork. Next year, you're the goth kid. Next year, you're whatever.
Sure.
Like that's you. Like any bands from that era, they're hungry to change and to progress and try to do new things. Yeah.
And you're listening
so if you
to
try
influences.
if you're like, you're going to sound like one of the few exceptions is Dismember, where every album they did was pretty much in the same ballpark, just tweaked a little bit here and there, but not many bands have that kind of I don't know, are that happy to or are that happy just to stay with what they're what they're doing.
It's like AC/DC,
Yeah, exactly. They've done the same record 30 times or whatever.
So I guess what we're going to start with is we're going to look at some of the stuff from Surgical Steel, and again, the whole goal of this kind of comeback episode is we're playing a little bit less music than we normally would, but just kind of along this idea of the comeback theme.
Sure.
And hopefully our comeback is more in line with, I guess, the Carcass comeback and less in line with, say, like Kiss Psycho Circus or Chinese Democracy from Guns N' Roses or something that clearly
Psycho
did not
Circus
work.
isn't quite as bad as Chinese Democracy, but
so we're going to play a trio of songs from Surgical Steel, and we don't have to go like deep in totally dissecting some of this stuff, but one of the songs that you really were excited to play was Master's Butcher's Apron, which we're going to start things off with. What is it about this song that, like, I guess kind of draws you, and actually talk about what's been going on with you and Carcass, because Mark actually has some Carcass things to kind of talk about. But
yeah, the song, it just sounds like it sounds like a pre-Necroticism thing to me. There's blasts in it. There's super catchy riffs. I mean, it's everything I love about Carcass, basically, right there. But yeah, I've been ever since we went. I don't know if we're still podcasting when the Chicago Surgical Steel show.
We're done. That was last winter, I believe.
Yeah, so ever since last winter,
a year ago from
I've had a relationship with Carcass where I've been doing some merch for them and doing a couple posters and logo redesigns and stuff like that. So it's been interesting being able to. And I think
near the end of our kind of original podcasting reign, we started talking about how funny it was that one of our podcasting listeners who had contacted us a lot and requested certain episodes was Ben Ash.
Who's now the
guitar player in Carcass, alongside Bill and stuff. It was just sort of like a surreal, like, oh, this is really actually happening.
I remember talking to him on Facebook, just through Messenger or whatever, before any of this
was announced,
and he's like, "Oh, I'm coming to MDF." I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome," because he's from the UK.
Yeah.
So I was like, "Oh, that's cool." He's like, "And I'm going to be playing with a band." I was like, "Oh fuck, who's it going to be?" Like Benediction was playing that year. So I was like, "What, like Benediction?" Or he's like, "Nope." And I was just like, who the fuck would it have been? And when I find out, I was like, holy crap.
Yeah, like our friend is in Carcass.
And the cool thing is that the whole way he got it was because they heard from a friend, because Ben used to do these...
the how-to videos.
The how-to, like, breakdowns of, like, how, certain guitar players did their sound, or, like, how Entomb did, the heavy, the H2 pedal stuff. And it's like, that's awesome that based on his enthusiasm and technical ability and merit, and all that
it's like
kind of
that
stuff.
Filipino guy who joined Journey from his
sounds
karaoke
better
stuff.
than Steve Perry. Yeah. Like that's really encouraging to see that people are like reaching out that way for, like, enthusiasm does does get you something in the long run.
Sure. And then in a strange way, it kind of came back to you because your diehard enthusiasm for like Paradise Lost and Carcass has started to open up doorways for you to do some of their merch and T-shirt designs and poster designs. And I mean, like,
that's huge for me.
Kind of badass.
Like it's not, I'm not being dumped with piles of money, but artistically, I'm being very validated because this is the stuff that I want to do since I was a teenager.
Yeah, it's not like doing. Blood Duster covers for Relapse.
Which, looking back at it, is probably one of my better covers. But that I got to just do myself. That wasn't some weird noise thing. But no, that's great to be able to be kind of peers in a way. Where a band of that ilk will come to you and like, I want you to do something for me because I like what you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Death metal, just like, Albert was like, I'd never imagined that I would make a career talking about death metal. Like, that's exactly, I feel the exactly same way.
I never imagined that we would do 170 episodes of podcasts, that first run. Really, like, it was sort of...
It's the modern zine.
It just kind of got some momentum, and hopefully we can pick up that momentum again. And, we definitely encourage you guys to give us feedback and stuff on what you want us to do as we sort of proceed forward. So, but let's get into this Carcass comeback here. We got a trio of Carcass tunes. We got Master's Butcher's Apron. And then we got, let me get this all right, Non-Compliance to ASTM F89 12 Standard.
I used to remember what that meant.
Yeah, we'll look it up or something. And then Captive Bolt Pistol. And one of the things about these, and we could talk a little bit more, but Non-Compliance in particular has some really amazing soloing and a lot of like kind of classic, I used to call them like Bill Steer chunk riffs, kind of like what he does in like No Love Lost and some of that kind of stuff. And then Captive Bolt Pistol kind of sounds like a Tools of Trade kind of throwback. It's got that kind of like,
it's pretty speedy,
faster than fast kind of sound to it. That's pretty sweet. And then we're gonna end with an At the Gates tune, Death in the Labyrinth, and we'll sort of talk more about the At the Gates comeback when we get back. So enjoy Carcass, Master's Butcher's Apron.
The sun never sets, the blood never dries. Their souls sacrifice, the other butchers maligned. The sun never sets, the blood never dries. Lest we forget. The sun never sets, sinners never dry. This death was bloodshed on the wetted knives. For your sons you never wet, the blood never dries. Death fruitless sacrifice of the master butchers. Never trusted in the dark, pecuniary villain, yet decaying will to rapine and plunder. Like maggots colonizing, diseases contaminating, expressionist plate to build. his melodious dance. The ostentatious triumphalism, the performance of despair. Virtuosos of the visceral, Nazi sons of the mark. Wretched morbid euphemism. This is the way of all flesh that will decay. The cycle of death exhausted will truly plagued. A vacuous malaise for which you scarcely gaze. Law is common, denomination. Human nation's laws are sown. Plagiarized,
That was At the Gates, Death, and the Labyrinth. And then before that, we had a trio of Carcass tunes. We had Captive Bolt Pistol, Noncompliance to ASTM. I won't give you the rest. And then we started the set off with Master's Butcher's Apron. And we were talking about Surgical Steel being one of these kind of successful comeback records.
Yeah.
And then the other great comeback record, kind of in line, I would say of equal status with Carcass, is At the Gates, At War with Reality, which of course we just heard. I guess it would be the opening number of that track, of that album after the intro that we didn't play.
The intro, I'm sure, has a lot. If that's the first thing you hear off the new album, you're just like, what in the fuck? Are we watching like a Jodorowsky movie or like, what the fuck is this shit? But yeah, then it kind of blasts into pretty. I mean, this is. I think I hold the Carcass slightly above it. Purely, I think as an artistic exercise, At the Gates is great. It's a great record.
Sure,
it's a very mature record, but somehow Carcass was able to grab some of that youthful songwriting, like just like the energy and everything to it is there a little more. But At the Gates, I mean, it's a great follow up. I couldn't have. It's not what I wanted. It's not what I expected, but it's really good.
Mm-hmm. What do you think you were wanting more?
I wanted somehow for them to get a little more weird.
Okay.
To do a little bit, but there's some, they try some riffing on there that's, goes back to, Red in the Sky-ish kind of, but it's real.
If not with Fear type stuff.
Yeah, but also like Adrian's drumming is so precise that you can't, he was struggling just to stay, on the beat all the time back then. So it's hard to kind of replicate anything like that. But I mean, it's still solid.
Do you think you can make the argument that Carcass needed Surgical Steel more than At the Gates needed At War with Reality?
Oh, absolutely.
For like a legacy type thing because of the controversy of Swan Song, kind of the unsuredness maybe of that as their final kind of testament. Maybe
yeah, because At the Gates had nothing to prove.
Nothing. Not one thing.
They put out, I mean, the only thing you can say that's not good about At the Gates is their album art. It's not consistent.
Yeah.
They've never had like, oh, awesome. Like, what the hell is the, well, I guess, Red in the Sky is ours. That's interesting. It's got their logo is like untouchable on that record.
With Fear's kind of interesting. Terminal Spirit
with Fear, I like.
Terrible.
Terminal Spirit is terrible and dated.
Yeah. Slaughter's not bad.
Slaughter's not bad, but it's not great.
Yeah. Was that Christian Wallen, right?
It's Christian Wallen. Yeah. The color, I mean, it's fine what it is, but the color palette is just a little. And I've heard justifications for a lot of it. I mean, it's fine.
Yeah.
This is nitpicking through history, so it's not a big deal. Like this is just like everything they did is great. If I had to make any kind of criticism, this is what I would.
Gotcha.
I would say is like their art has never. They like Carcass always had a pretty clear artistic vision, except Swan Song was just kind of like, well, fuck, let's put it out.
Sure.
Eric will agree to put it out. Let's throw this weird cover on it and go to town, but. There's some band like Paradise Lost also has a very uneven artistic as far as like visual image to their
you
stuff.
Go with like some of their early records up through Draconian were just incredible.
And then if you look at the whole even like Icon, Draconian Times, even all the singles, same art direction, great photography, it all fit together really well. Even 1 Second, Host, the stuff was okay.
Sure.
But they don't have that deep. I think Carcass has probably had the most identifiable visual image out of all that. And
sure.
I don't know. That's why I think that one surprised me more.
Gotcha. When I picked it up, I think it had already started to get a little bit of, attention. Obviously, I mean, everyone was waiting to kind of hear what this was. I think I was unsurprised at how good Carcass was. I think I was more surprised at how good At the Gates was. I don't know why. I think I just, I guess the Haunted was sort of like had run its course, and I knew that vocally Thomas would be top notch because I followed
He's
him
always
vocally.
great. Yeah.
But again, Adrian had been Cradle of Filth.
He was in Cradle of Filth. He's been in Paradise Lost for the last like 4 records.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, okay. I guess I had kind of taken that for granted.
And in Valenfire too.
Oh yeah, had Valenfire come out when the first Valenfire had come out? I think by the time At the Gates emerged.
As for reunion stuff, possibly. I'm not. I'd have to look back at.
Well, no, reunion it hadn't. I think the first Valenfire was like 2011, 2012, maybe. Because this last one was just this.
It was
year.
right after he became a permanent member of Paradise Lost, even though he doesn't play with them very much live because he's At the Gate stuff. But that's okay.
But but when I first put this on the first time, I was like, okay, this is cool. And then the second time, I was like, all right, I'm liking this more and more and more. And whereas I think the Carcass hit me immediately, I was like impressed, like whoa, like because of the necroticisms, because they were drawing all the way back to that kind of golden era so much.
Well, we had blast beats. We hadn't had blast beats in a long time.
Yeah, I know there were none on Swan Song,
and they're like not blast beats like like Black Dahlia, where an entire song can be a blast beat.
Yeah,
it was for effect.
Yep,
like back when I
tasteful stuff. Yeah,
yeah. Cool. You don't have to play lightning fast all the time. But I think the At the Gates, it's so mature. Mm-hmm. It's like really class. I mean, it's real classy shit. It's not. It's the whole thing. It seems like a concept record. It is a concept. I mean, based on a lyrical concept record. Mm-hmm. But not like beating you over the head with it. But it's just really artfully done and works better as an entire album than pulling out a single here or there.
Sure. Yeah.
Which the Carcass works really well as. I mean, it works good as a whole cohesive album.
But there's more like memorable songs that I can distinctively pull out. Yeah. And I think that was like the trickiness when like Mark got here. I was like, well, what songs do you want to play At the Gates? And we were both like shrugged our shoulders like, I don't know.
It's all pretty good.
It's all pretty good, yeah. So it's not like a record that we have a ton to say other than to say like kudos, like they, like Carcass, have set themselves up for kind of phase 2 of their careers if they choose to. If they just decided to quit at this point and say, hey, we just wanted to prove that we could do this and we're not just a legacy band touring on our greatest hits or something like that, then so be it too. I would tip my hat to them and say, cool, you haven't done anything to tarnish your legacy whatsoever. Yeah. And I think that's what's kind of so interesting about, those two particular comebacks. So we're going to hear a couple more At the Gate songs for those of you that, there's probably very few people out there that haven't heard the new At the Gate stuff, but
it's all on YouTube.
You never know. Yeah, you never know. I mean, I have friends, I was telling Mark, that are non-metal fans that listen to old Requiem episodes just because they like, the banter and some of the stuff.
Yeah, I've heard that recently too. Like, about. People just want, like, I've been re-listening to all of the episodes and I was like, thank you, that's great.
Yeah. So if you haven't heard the new At the Gates, you're going to hear a little bit more of At War with Reality.
But you should just go out and buy the Carcass and At the Gates if you haven't.
They're both pretty amazing. Yeah. So we've got The Conspiracy, The Blind on the way, and then The Book of Sand. But then what we're going to get into after that is a couple of songs from, I don't even think I mentioned it yet, from the comeback that is also, I think, just as maybe anticipated, but it's had a little bit more mixed results. And I've told Mark that the more I listen to this record, the more I generally begin to like it. And what we're talking about is Refused, the album Freedom. And Refused isn't a band that we've done any kind of podcasting about before. We've done Carcass and At the Gate stuff in the past. They are kind of in extreme kind of music circles. They are talked about, even though they're more in the punk direction, I say, than the metal
punk and
direction.
Like hardcore, metalcore stuff.
Yeah. And their legacy, we'll talk a little bit more in the next talk set about whether or not this record should have been made or shouldn't have been made. But they, I think, and this is my parting thought before we go into playing some music, is this. When they put out their last record, it was called Shape of Punk to Come. And in a sense, that was a definitive mic-dropping kind of statement. There was already this awareness when you heard that record that they had recorded it, put it out, and they're basically breaking up. Mm-hmm. Whereas I think like At the Gates, they toured after they put, like
Slow to Soul was never intended to be the last record.
And Carcass, yes, but I think they didn't go into the studio intending that. I think it was a matter of like the politics that happened because of the record,
Yeah.
Whereas I think in a sense there was almost a manifesto to punk shape of punk to come. You know, the
Ornette Coleman reference to the title and stuff too is like, this is game changer.
They're kind of like Swedish, like anarchist, communist kind of lyrics kind of going on shape of punk to come, and so there was this finality to it where like you heard it, and again, like I always say, kind of like a mic drop. Like that was it, a definitive last statement. So when I heard Refused were kind of making a comeback, I was less excited and more fearful than I was, say, with Carcass and At the Gates, because I didn't really know what else I needed to hear from this band.
That was kind of with my limited experience. So I've heard Shape of Punk to come a handful of times, and I had it until recently. I sold it, the CD, because whatever.
You've been selling all your CDs.
But then I wasn't really familiar with anything before that, but I knew what they were about, what their legacy was, like why they were important. And I just immediately thought of, well, why are they putting...
Sure.
What could they do that's gonna... And especially seeing what the careers of everybody else in the band had been up until this point, like, what else do you have to say in a more extreme realm than you were doing in your other...
Yeah.
Stuff. Like I didn't want it would seem weird for them to come back and completely just do like a watered down version of what they were.
Sure. And we can talk a little bit more about Freedom when we come back in our final talk set about whether or not it was a more watered down sort of version, or whether it just was a left of center thing and they just kind of took a detour and said, hey, fuck it, let's just try this and do that. And we'll debate the merits of that. So we've got Conspiracy of the Blind and The Book of Sand from At the Gates, At War with Reality. And then we've got a pair of songs from Freedom, Electra and Thought is Blood.
Let
is blood, cerebral past, imagination never rest. Storm of doubt, awake all night, blood is gushing to pick a fight. Thought is blood, I am born, I'm reborn, and born again, and born again, and born again, and born again. I've got it connected. I've got it. I've got it connected. I've got it. In my hand, won't I end? I'm destroyed and born again. A soul of blood reincarnates. Flood my veins, fill my hate. When we fought under control, we make the trace to find a hole. Thought is blood, I am born, I'm reborn, and born again, and born again, and born again. I've got it connected. I've got it. I've got it connected. I've got it. Feel it perfected. Thought is blood. Thought is blood. Thought is blood. I am born. Thought is blood. I'm reborn. The thought of fear is a type of fear. The thought of sex is a type of sex. And when we need a guilt, we thought of guilt. And when we need a God, we thought of God. When we need a God, we thought of God. When we need a God, we thought of God. When we need a God, we thought of God. 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 Yeah. Thought of God. We thought of God. We thought of God.
That was Thought is Blood and Electra from Refuse Freedom record. And then we started things off with the Book of Sand, and we opened things up with the Conspiracy of the Blind from At the Gates' At War with Reality. So as I said, when we kind of went into those songs, and I know, you just kind of mentioned you're not a huge Refuse fan. Any thoughts that came to mind when you heard about like them making sort of a comeback or anything? Because you had to do the review for them or the illustration for
Decibel. It was the lead review at this point probably 3 months ago.
Yeah, it was a Lucifer cover, if I remember right.
Was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just looking at that.
Yeah, because that was I was just like, the first thought was just like, why? Mm-hmm. Like I thought they were done. I didn't think they had any interest in retreading this kind of, or at least even going back and exploring that kind of songwriting anymore. And at that point, I'd never, and I follow most, metal-ish or, metal or hardcore tinged not message boards, but, all the typical social media stuff. So I at least get an earshot. I get a lot of PR notices and stuff like that as well. And I was just kind of came out of nowhere. To me, I had no idea what was going on.
Yeah, they're sort of a strange band. I kind of hold them in the same like reverence with like At the Drive-In, and like those are bands that like represent kind of the late 90s, early 2000s that like I'm pretty firmly happy with how they sort of went out in a way.
Yeah.
I never really followed Dennis, the lead vocalist, into International Noise Conspiracy. It was never like a band that I was like that interested in, because musically I think they were kind of boring. Like they still had the Refused vocalist, but like part of what made Refused Shape of Punk to Come like so interesting was this sort of like amalgamation of like musical ideas that were kind of left of center. And
what year was Shape of Punk? Was that
97? Yeah.
Oh, because okay,
yeah, 96, 97 era.
So predated all of that.
Yeah,
the hardcore scene.
In a sense, it was like it was predictive of the future, but yet at the same time, nobody else really sounded like that record, and it was kind of like a stamp in time, just kind of a singular kind of like creative thing. And so I think from what I've read in the interviews and stuff, Refused kind of said that one of the reasons they decided to make this comeback is they were already starting to do some when Faith No More was doing some of their comeback tours, like back in 2012, 2011.
Were they part of some of those?
They would pull Refused as like one of their opening bands. Okay. So ironically, in the context of all these comebacks we've been talking about, we brought up Faith No More earlier. And people would come up to them and be like, well, you can't do anything after Shape of Punk to Come. And they almost like kind of took that as like a fuck you like challenge. Like, well, let's try it. Let's just see.
Yeah.
And they said that they didn't really ever go back and use Shape of Punk to Come as an idea factory for what to do with the next record. And so you can't really see Freedom, and I mean kind of an ironically titled record when you think about it, that they were just sort of like doing whatever they wanted to do in 2015 and just calling it, you either like it or you don't. And I mean, Electra is a very I guess perfunctory like Refused song. It almost has kind of like a War Pigs kind of opening.
Yeah.
And then Destroy the Man that we just Destroy the Man that we're going to sort of end the set with is very much a traditional sort of Refused song. Thought Is Blood is probably my favorite record off that new record, the song that we just heard. And I think if they continue to do some things in that sort of tradition,
more refined.
Yeah, like you and I were kind of both talking about like vocally, he kind of has like a Steve Brodsky kind of like Jupiter sort of feel. There's kind of like these cool like kind of keyboard kind of production sort of things that are sort of floating around.
Yeah, it kind of has that vibe of some of the like No Heroes, Converge, where they got away from the hardcore-ish stuff, but it still has the emotional impact of that stuff.
Yeah, I think if they did... Like, I think what's so interesting about Freedom is it's a very eclectic record, but I think that's also its weakness. I think it's, there's a couple songs that I was kind of talking to Mark about this that were produced by, what's his name, Shellback or whatever the hell we
this
just
pop producer?
Up. Yeah, the pop producer, which got them a lot of attention. And that's almost like kind of an anarchist, kind of like, fuck you, we're the ultimate communist band, and we're going to work with the producer that did Taylor Swift and Britney Spears. It's almost like, joke's on you kind of thing. So... I don't really know if this is just them kind of doing an album just to do an album, but not as a beginning of a continuation of a career. Then I think it will hold up as kind of an interesting kind of experiment. I think, like I told you before, I like it a little bit more each time I listen to it, but I don't love it yet. And I loved At the Gates and I loved Carcass pretty quickly. And I think what people are having sort of trouble doing with this Refused record is Shape of Punk to Come was so eclectic, but yet it was so cohesive in kind of a weird way too. Like when you hear it, like it flowed really well. And I like this record, but it's kind of lacks a little bit of that cohesion. And I think, time will tell whether or not this was a successful comeback for a band like Refused. Whereas I think now we know Carcass, that was a successful comeback, and we can probably make the same claim with At the Gate. So I wasn't picking Refused out to say it was an abject failure, like these guys fucking shit the bed, or it's a good record. It's got some good songs. I think they're committed to it, and I think they purposely didn't want to do anything like Shape of Punk to Come.
Are they touring off this too?
I think so. I missed them when they were playing, I don't know, this summer or something like that. I think there was a show. So yeah, they're doing stuff with it, but it'll be interesting to see what they kind of do from here. So, and speaking of interesting to do from here, it'll be interesting to see what we do from here. We'd have some definite ideas. We have a comeback. Hopefully, by the time you guys hear this, our lost missing episode that we recorded 2 years ago will emerge
leave that
somewhere.
As a surprise. And
that's
that
kind of
will probably be. I might throw that in as like 172.
Cool.
So it'll be after this one or something, and then we'll throw out the the ones that we're gonna kind of follow up with.
Which I dig. And I just recently resurrected our Facebook page. So if you've gone to our Facebook page, it's Mark and Jason. Look us up. I'm going to kind of resurrect that and use that a little bit more. requiempodcast@gmail.com. Let us know, like, what you thought. Like, I know it's been 2 years. Obviously, any feedback, any ideas, things like that, let us know. Pretty soon, we're going to get this going on a website, including Bandcamp, which will allow us to do some donations and things like that, even if it's just like $1 or $2 donation.
Yeah, you can listen to it for free, but it's like going to the museum. If you want to give them a $5 every once in a while, that's cool. If not, that's fine too. But we just would like to make a little cash to pay for our extra things we have to, like. We don't have hosting fees now, but you still have to pay like $15 a year for the domain names
and gas
and things like
different
that.
things like that.
Yeah, we don't do
this to make money.
We buy the music we need for, like, if we need to get a couple CDs, we'll buy the CDs through Amazon Used or at a record store instead of trying to get them from a torrent or something. So.
Sure. And then something I'll probably use a little bit more than the Facebook one is we just created a Twitter account, so it's Requiem Podcast. So you can look it up on Twitter, and we'll start kind of posting some stuff there, and hopefully create a little bit of momentum and things like that. We'll follow you, you follow us. You know how that goes. So we're gonna end things though tonight with another Refused song called "Destroy the Man." And this is kind of like standard Refused type stuff. And it's interesting. You were kind of talking. It escaped me, and I forgot to mention it, that early Refused stuff, Thomas Skogsberg actually produced their stuff, and it's pretty cool.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of sludgy, heavy, like hardcore, and then they got a little bit more like refined sound before Shape of Punk. But yeah, their like very first old stuff was like done in Sunlight Studios and that whole thing. So they're in a weird way linked to some of this stuff. But anyways, we're gonna end with "Destroy the Man" from Refused Freedom, and give us some feedback. I'm glad to be back. It's been far too long, and expect this to not be just a flash in the pan, but hopefully the beginning of a new era. So for "Destroy the Man" and Refused, I am Jason,
and I'm Mark.